Hi, this is Andrea, and I'd like to continue on my previous blog that I did, day 180, where I did a two-part blog on how demon possession worked. And I've been listening to the demon possession series, Demons in the Afterlife, and having where Mikey explains how demon possession used to work, what were the common denominators existent within the human being that allowed interdimensional demons to actually possess human beings. Specifically, he would explain how a demon would utilize that which already existed within the human mind to be able to possess a person. So, for example, demons wouldn't come into a person and necessarily express themselves as much as they were there to utilize the energy existent within the human mind, because that's how the mind consciousness system functions. It creates energy through thinking, feeling, emotions, reactions, so forth. Our day-to-day mechanics of the mind, you might call it. And through the functioning of the mind generates its own energy for the mind consciousness system to function. So you could say it is a self-sustaining machine. And the demons, what they used to do is why demons possessed people in the first place was because in crossing over, the being would realize that for them to exist as a being of energy, which is what was the understanding back in the day, was that the being would have to attach itself to a human being, and through the human being's mind energy systems draw energy from the person. So what the beings would basically do, the demons would do, is they would look inside a being before they even chose a human for possession. They would look at different human beings and they would look at who would make the most suitable person for possession based on existing personality designs that would allow the person to generate more energy for the demon to draw from. So, for example, Mikey, the demon who was speaking through the portal, would draw parallels between lifetime possessions. This would be demons that would pick a person from a very young age, a baby or a young person, would integrate into the being, into the mind physical relationship, and would basically live through the person from very young until whatever age. They would then withdraw from the person. This for the specific purpose of, let's say, primarily two factors. One being obviously because you can just stay inside the vessel and draw all the energy that you need to exist, and through this decision you're obviously merging with the being, so you're living their life with them, which is what a lot of beings who crossed over, what they missed about being human, because in crossing over, one then is in the dimensional existence and you float around for how many ever years, and then the being would go, okay, wait, I am now, missing all of these human experiences that I could be having. So they would then become street smart, let's call it that, and realize, okay, I can integrate back into a human and live out their lives with them. And then they'd obviously select the type of human whose life they'd like to live, whether it's a person who is closely suited to their own expression in which they crossed over, which could be a person who likes partying or a rich life, or a person who is fun and expressive, or a person who has many friends and goes out a lot, or a person who is intellectual and a philosopher and a this and a that. So it would obviously depend on who that specific being was when they crossed over the time of death. They would then choose a human that could facilitate them, through which they could live their life. And the other factor would then be that if a being was only interested in temporary energy fix or an energy source, they would only possess a person for a very short period of time. And this is where you would see the possessions that were the ones that we're more familiar with in the media, the ones where it would be the person would start acting out, start acting strange, withdrawn, anger, and you would see the typical possessive traits coming through, which would then draw to them, specific religious or belief system modalities that would say, okay, like the church or whatever spiritual belief the family believed in, and they would then, in a lot of cases, seek out that specific help that would link in with their belief system at the time, and the person would then have some spiritual intervention, and the people would try and draw the demon out of the body. Now, this in itself meant that the demons didn't go to a heaven, and they didn't go to a hell, and they didn't do those kind of things. They would basically just through the entire possession experience, as I wrote about in the previous 2 blogs, they would trigger experiences that are already existent and programmed into the mind of the individual. Please read the 2 blogs for more contextual information on this, but basically, as the possession would escalate, as you would have noticed during exorcisms or spiritual cleansings, what would actually happen is that the demon would then utilize that time to really trigger and pull from the mind all the hidden dimensions that have been programmed in since childhood, all the fears, all the grudges, all angers, all the resentments, all the suppressed emotional and thought constructs, and would then bring that to the surface. And that's what would appear to the person viewing possession would be, it's the demon that's really fighting, and the religious person over here is really using key words like Christ and the body of Christ and God, and I compel you, and all those kind of things, and holy water and crosses and all kinds of symbolic symbols, and that this inside the human being, the demon would be reacting, and that is why the demon would be screaming and shouting and carrying on. In those the two-part blog that I did explain why the demon was acting out in the way it was, screaming and cursing and talking about obscenities and targeting family members and sex and God, and it would carry on, and I explained in those 2 blogs what, in the interview, Mikey was explaining what the demons were actually busy doing there, that they were not becoming desperate, or they were not really expressing themselves so much, because most of the time, he said, the being that was coming through was actually quite stable. Yes, it might view in the possession some of its own personal opinions and views about God and religion and humanity, but what it was primarily doing is it was tapping into the being's own belief systems, so that it could, through that, generate inside the person their own friction and their own energy production of the mind. And this is what the demon was there to do. And obviously it was also in the room, it was observing which people in the room had specific beliefs and fears, and it would then use specific words and tonalities to communicate to the people in the room. So as you've seen in some documented cases, or some possession style movies that might depict factual points that are actual referenced from historical events, there you would notice that they would target a specific person in the room and speak about their suppressed issues and secrets, and then the person in the room would react and go, oh no, how does he know about that? And what they were actually doing is that they were actually also accessing the energy systems within the people in the room. So that was the points that I brought across in those 2 parts of the blog, which I want to recap here on, just to give a contextual bit of background, because then in part 8, 9, and 10, which I've listened to, Mikey also then goes into more examples of how demon possession worked, why they possessed people, how the different mind systems in the being worked, and how they observed these mind systems, which allowed them, through integrating and observing, to find the specific energy systems that they could tap into, in many cases accentuate, and from that draw the energy that they required.